It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Gia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Kern from Minnesota, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
There is a famous quote, and the quote goes like this. Sometimes, crying or laughing are the only options left, and laughing feels better right now. No, we're not making fun of the pandemic. No, we're not making fun of people who died. But it's important in moments of crisis to keep the right perspective, and don't forget to find moments to laugh. There is a famous Greek philosopher I've been reading about, and I want to share it with you. His name is Diogenes. He only had one possession in life, and it was a wooden bowl. And he used to carry this wooden bowl around with him everywhere he went. One day he saw a poor peasant boy drinking water with his hands, cupping his hands from the water and drinking it. He threw the wooden bowl away and said, "Fool that I am, to be carrying around this superfluous baggage this whole time." There are a lot of stories about Diogenes and his life. He's often depicted living in a barrel. There's a famous encounter between Diogenes and Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had heard about Diogenes' philosophy and wanted to meet him, and one day found him in a field next to a barrel. As he approached Diogenes, he said, "Diogenes, anything I can do for you, you name it and I will give it to you." Diogenes thought for a moment and said, "Yes, there is one thing. Can you move out of the way? You're blocking the sun." After this encounter, Alexander the Great was reported as saying, "If I wasn't Alexander, I wish to be Diogenes." Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you deal with it. Everything is perspective. Is there a point to this story? No. But it got your mind off things. I hope everyone is staying safe during this time of crisis. I hope everyone's doing well. We're going to be fine. We're going to get through this. In a couple months, we'll forget about the coronavirus. We'll forget about all of this, and life will go back to normal. Got a great show planned for you. We'll be talking to James, and James comes to us from Washington State. He's had a couple strange encounters that happened to him up there near Darrington, which is a notorious hotspot for sightings. But the bulk of his encounters happened to him in Alabama, I believe back in the 90s. He even had one sighting out there in Alabama, and pay close attention to the behavior of the creatures. I know if you've been listening to the show for a while, you guys can probably pick up on it right away. But it's fascinating stuff. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. And I'm going to try and do a couple additional shows this week. I know a lot of people are stuck inside, can't get out. So thank you so much for being here. Let's actually jump into it tonight. I want to welcome James to the show. James, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I'm glad to be on. Just interested in get these stories out so people aren't afraid of talking about this. You know, a lot of people are scared to talk about their encounters, and I think it's important that we get the word out there to everybody.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being here, and I know you're up there in Seattle. Can you give the audience just a real quick update? How are you doing up there in Seattle with this whole coronavirus, and kind of what are you seeing up there beyond empty grocery stores?
You know, everything right now is really just, you know, as normal, unless you go to one of the big box stores and then you see, you know, some people overbuying some things and, you know, the shelves cleared out in the can aisles and, of course, the toilet paper, which I don't understand the toilet paper thing. But, you know, it's not actually that bad because, you know, this is considered the hot zone up here. But it doesn't seem to be that bad. I don't think people need to worry. Just, you know, do the regular precautions that you would normally do in a situation where, you know, you have a virus going around. Just practice good sanitation.
It's good advice. Good advice. Well, getting on, I know people aren't tuning in for the coronavirus, but, you know, I like to ask people, it's on everyone's mind. We're all thinking about it. I think deep down, we're all a little nervous about it, but you're right, James. We're going to get through this. Everything's going to be fine. Everyone relax and save some toilet paper for the rest of us. You know what I mean? I almost think like the CIA is buying up the toilet paper because everyone I talk to is like, I don't get the toilet paper thing.
Exactly.
But if you would, I know your encounter took place in Alabama. There's a couple encounters, but the very first one where you saw it with your friend, if you would just kind of take us back to that moment, tell us what you were doing and walk us into what happened.
Yeah, sure. Well, this is back in the early 90s, and I played in a rock band, and we had just got finished recording a demo, and we were all happy about the demo, and we decided to go up to an old place to celebrate where we used to have BB gun wars. And it was up on a ridge, to give you an explanation and a layout of the land where we were. It's in Huntsville, Alabama. I don't mind saying where this is at. I got a lot of friends back there, so hopefully some are listening. But right behind Grissom High School, there's a mountain that runs from, it's called Montesano Mountain and Green Mountain. They're connected in Huntsville, Alabama, and they run all the way down to the Tennessee River. And Green Mountain is the one that's closest to the Tennessee River. Well, we had went up to this place where we used to have BB gun wars, and it was behind Grissom High School. And it's not a place that there's a known trail. It's just you got to kind of know how to get up there because you got to go between people's houses and stuff like that. So we decided to go up there and camp out for a night, just kind of celebrate amongst the band, you know, the completion of the demo. And it was a late decision. So it was around 9:30 at night when we decided to go up there. And this was during all I can say, it was during the dry time of the year. So anywhere from, you know, I would say April through August, September in Alabama, it's going to be very dry, very humid. And so, you know, there was a lot of dead leaf on the ground from the year past, but the trees were very green. And, you know, so we hiked up there through the woods. It's about probably a 35-minute hike up through the woods to get up there. It's not very far. But when you get up on top of the mountain there, it kind of flattens out into a nice, big, wide open area. And then, you know, we decided to just set up right there because it wasn't real windy, wasn't going to rain. We just said, yeah, let's build a fire here, set up our camps, because there were 5 of us. It was me, Carlos, David, and Mike. And so we started setting up camp, and we got everything set up, and we had the fire going. And, you know, what we were doing is we had brought a box or, you know, a radio cassette player or whatever, and we were playing our demo. We were listening to it. And just enjoying it and talking about it. And about 11 to 11:30, I think I was the first one to start hearing it. And on the backside of Green Mountain there, it goes off into a valley where there's just a few homes and a lot of farms. It's a lot of open land, but it's a very steep incline to go down that way. I mean, you could traverse it, but it wouldn't be fun. And we heard something coming up that way. And so we were like, is this someone homeless coming up? Because it was real obvious that it was on 2 feet. You could hear each footstep very clearly going through the leaves as it was walking up. It was a and then when it kind of topped up on top of the mountain there, we noticed it sounded like, to us, it either had an accident or it was very frustrated because a lot of limbs started being broke. There was a lot of commotion over in that area. And then it started walking around our camp, and it was outside of the fire line. Okay. It was just out. It stayed outside that fire line, where we could not see it. And it walked around our camp it walked around fully around about twice. And it took about 40 to 45 minutes for it to do it, because it would walk a little bit and then it would stop. And we would listen, because we were paying a lot of attention to this, because we were very nervous at this point. All 5 of us. One of us had a Jack Daniels bottle in his hand. The other one had a small hatchet in his hand. It was a perfect horror movie scenario. And, we're just looking out there. And when it would stop, it would move a little bit. You could hear it move within the brush a little bit, like you could hear like a limb break, and just like small stuff, nothing major. And, after about 40, 45 minutes of that, we just said, okay, we've had enough of this. We're not going to go to bed. This isn't going to happen. So we literally just took what was important to us, and we left, and we came back the next day and got our stuff. Now, can I say that was a Bigfoot? I can't say it was Bigfoot, but I don't know anything else that's on 2 feet that would have done the stuff it did. And one thing I did leave out is it huffed at us a couple of times. And when I say huffed, I'm not talking about like a deer grunt, when they're mad. If you've heard them stomp and they'll grunt at you. So it's not like that. It was a release of air, a very big release of air a couple of times. You could just hear wherever the air was coming from, there was a lot of room there, and it was very noticeable. And that's really what freaked us out, because at first we thought it was just some homeless man, but then when we heard that's the thing that kind of made us go, okay, this isn't normal. This doesn't sound right. We don't feel good about this. We're just wanting to listen to our demo tape and have a good time, and this isn't going to happen. So we just decided to vacate and get out of there, and we came back the next day to get our stuff. And for the life of me, I wish I could remember the condition of the stuff, because I do want to say I remember some stuff being messed with, but I can't say 100% for sure because it's been so long. But on that same ridge, going to the second encounter here, because this happened about 2 years later, me and Carlos, he was up there that same night, just down about probably 4 miles. I figured out it was when I looked on Google Earth. It's about 4 miles from where we were down to the end of Green Mountain, where we would go and hang out, and just me and a bunch of buddies and a lot of people. I mean, I'm 51, and people back in Alabama at that time, you didn't hang out in the bars. You didn't go to any. You went out in the woods and partied. That's what you did. You went and built bonfires and just had a good time and socialized. And there was no electronics. Only maybe one cool person might have a beeper, but that's about it. So yeah. So we would. We decided to go meet a couple of friends, Brad and Brian, up on this Powerline Trail is where it was, on top of the end of Green Mountain. And you had to drive up into a small neighborhood and then cut across a field and go over into the Powerline Trail. And there was a trail that you drove back. You could drive your car. It wasn't like real smooth, but you could get your car back there. And there was a certain point when you went back there that you had to pull around this big tree limb. It was a big pine tree limb that hung really low out, I'd say about 3 or 4 feet off the ground. And it hung real low out into the trail. We left it there because we would, thought it was a good cop deterrent, keep them from coming back there. So everybody just kind of drove around it. Otherwise, it'd scratch your car up real good. And what we had done is we had pulled down to where we always build the fire. We'd turned the car around. Now, this is at night, mind you. It's probably around 9 or 10 o'clock, I would say. And we were waiting for Brad and Brian to come up there, and we had turned around facing out the trail. Well, in Alabama, and in the South, there's a lot of red clay, and when the red clay is real dry, it's bright orange, kind of. So the moon was the sky was nice and clear that night, and the moon lit up the trail real well, so you could see the trail real easy. The mud, the red clay, and you could see the limb, coming out, that big limb coming out into the trail. And as me and Carlos were sitting there listening to a new album that just come out, I think it was Defenders of the Faith by Judas Priest, we were sitting there listening to it. Carlos was doing something over in his passenger seat, or in the driver's seat, and I was in the passenger seat. And I was looking down the path, waiting to see headlights come for our friends coming down the path. And all of a sudden, I noticed that part of the trail got blocked out for some reason. And I thought it was just the glare from something that Carlos was doing, in the windshield. There was a glare, and I thought maybe that's what it was. But then I noticed that's not what it was, because I noticed it was just really big. It was really blocking out a big portion right next to where that tree limb came out. Well, as soon as I started really trying to pay attention, it walked. And it took about, I'd say, 2.5 steps to clear the whole thing. And at first when I saw it moving, I was just like, okay, I'm seeing something. And then I noticed it actually pushed the branch or ran into the branch. I couldn't tell because I couldn't really see arms, but I could see 2 legs for sure. And it was probably about, I'd say maybe, I'd say it have to be 7 foot. But what was interesting about it was I would have had to easily say from front to back how thick it was in the chest area. It would have been about 2.5 feet. That's how thick it looked. It just looked really, really thick. And I was like thinking that I was going to see a back half come by, like the back half of a horse or, or a big deer or something. But that's not what I saw. I saw 2 very plain legs walking. And when it hit that branch, it pushed the branch around or ran into it. And you could hear the branch crack because we had our windows down. And that got Carlos's attention because I was just at the very moment going, Carlos, did you see that? And he looked up and he heard the crack and he says, what? I said, something just walked there. And he saw the branch moving and he freaked out. I freaked out. He was like, I'm not going to stay up here. So he instantly started the car and we just took off. We took off, down the mountain, and we ran into Brad and Brian coming up, and we told them we're not going back up there. They made fun of us. And, that was a long lasting joke for quite a while.
Let me ask you, how far away from you was the thing?
Probably about 20 yards. It was pretty close. I mean, I could definitely see, I couldn't see detail because it was just a silhouette. You could see it from the background, from the trail and the moonlight. But it was light enough, where you could definitely see that it wasn't a deer. We don't have bear there. I've heard of cats there, but I've never seen any sign of a cat. Mainly what we have there is deer and big fox squirrels. That's about it.
Yeah,
so
I would imagine too, James, seeing that your memory went back to the 2 years prior when that thing was circling your camp. Did you know what you were looking at, or at the time, what did you think you were looking at?
Well, there's a stigma this part of the mountain on Green Mountain actually has a lot of really creepy stuff. So anytime you're up on top of Green Mountain, it's creepy no matter what, because there's been a whole lot of really weird stuff that goes on there. It's had everything from devil worship. I mean, this is in the news and stuff. Devil worship. There was a really terrible murder that happened up there. There was, just all sorts of real creepy stuff that, goes on up there. So right around the corner from where we built our bonfire all the time. If you went down the trail about another probably 100 yards, it turned real swampy. And no one ever liked going down there because everybody would get creeped out. They felt like they were being watched. They just felt like something was watching them. It wasn't a really good feeling. So what did I think it was? I don't know. I didn't really, well, if I have to reflect back on the time behind the high school, the 2 years prior, I would have had to say that it took me about a few days, me and my friends talking about what we thought it was. Because I was the first one to come out and say, man, that was a Bigfoot. And everybody else was like, oh, I don't know, man. I don't know what it was. They didn't want to, they weren't in disagreement with me. They just didn't know. They weren't as much as into Bigfoot because I'd already seen like, the famous first one with Leonard Nimoy,
The Patterson. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the first time I'd ever seen that, I was just like, as a kid, because I grew up loving monster movies, Godzilla, Creature from the Black Lagoon, I loved it all. And, when I saw Bigfoot and I knew it was a documentary, I understood it as a kid. I was like, no, I think that could be real. To me, it felt like that could be real. And so, I always had an interest in it, but I was never going out of my way to look for it. But and I also thought that they were only up here, like in the north.
In Washington, yeah. I get that a lot.
Yeah. So it was very, very shocking. It took days for me to really reflect back on it, and actually years, because, when something like that happens to you, you can only, you go through moments of when you assess what happened, and you're like, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. You try to debunk it, and when you can't debunk it, what do you do? I just don't throw it away. I'm not just going to say, well, I'm never going to talk about it again. I'm just going to say, had something very strange happen, and it definitely wasn't a deer. And like I said, there's no other animals there. There was actually some horses up there because people had some barn, some stables up there, but it was no horse. It was absolutely no horse, because if it was a horse, I would have seen the legs. But what I saw was big, thick legs. And as I'm looking at them right now in my head, picturing them, the legs look to be like probably, oh man, a big round. I mean, goodness gracious, maybe, like a foot across, at the top part, a full foot across. And, they were big. I mean, I wouldn't say this was a big monster, as far as like from some of the numbers that I've heard, like especially up here, but it was big enough for me to not want to be around there.
Yeah, I get it. No, I get it. And their legs are like tree trunks when you see them,
Yeah. And we could hear it actually go off into the woods as we were pulling off. We heard it. And that's what, even because I was rolling up my window, because he was pulling around the tree, I was telling him, hold on, roll my window up. And he was just getting out of there. And so it was kind of a funny moment. But, that's what happened to me in Alabama. And that sparked an interest in me for a long time. And so from that point on, I started really looking into it. I've never went and looked for these creatures. I never, thought that I would know the proper way to do it, and so anyhow, we moved to Washington, up here to Washington State, back about 8 or 9 years ago. And up here in Washington State, I live up here, around Lake Stevens area. And we decided to go hunting the first time, me and a friend of mine that I had met through work. We decided to go hunting towards Darrington. And we were way out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the sticks. And we had set up camp behind a bunch of fall off of a mountain, a bunch of boulders, so we could block the wind from us. And so the boulders were actually very stacked real high. I mean, they were probably stacked about 14 or 15 feet high. It was really big. So it was a perfect, place to, have a windbreak. And we had something the second night we were there. We were there for 3 days, 2 nights. We had something walk down. Same thing. You could tell it was on 2 feet. It had very raspy breathing, and it growled at us. And when I say growled, I've heard bears growl. I've never heard a cat growl, but my buddy who was there with me, Chad, he said it wasn't a cat, and he didn't know what it was. He was the first one to start putting a round in the rifle, so I proceeded to follow his lead, and we just sat there real quiet listening to this thing as it growled at us for about probably 15 seconds, and then it walked off. And when it walked off, it was 100% on 2 feet. I dare anybody to argue that they can walk through the woods on 2 feet and make themselves sound like a deer, or vice versa. It doesn't work. And
I know that wasn't your only encounter there, but have you ever looked up the history of Darrington, that whole area? I mean,
I didn't until after this.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty notorious for sightings.
Yes, it is. It's a hot spot. I think I live pretty close to some hot spots here. And in fact, I heard just recently that there was a family of them sighted coming through a field right off Smoky Point, which is just down the road from me. And so that was pretty interesting.
I didn't mean to interrupt your story. So did you and Chad leave, or did you guys end up staying?
No, we stayed because we didn't know what it was. We stayed and we hunted. And the very strange thing about this area, though, was that we did not have any signs of animal while we were up there. I think we saw two. What do you call them? What are the birds? What are the mountain chickens? What's the bird that everybody hunts?
Turkey?
No, it's like a small chicken, like a wild chicken out in the woods. Oh, what is it called? I have to think of it.
You're not talking about a grouse, are you?
Grouse. Yep, grouse. That's what I'm talking. He was calling it a mountain chicken. I think he was doing that because I'm from Alabama. So
I get you.
He kept calling it a mountain chicken. So that's the only thing we saw. And we saw plenty of bedding sites, where animals had been bedded down. We found great, wildlife trails, but there was no sign of any animal during this 3 days we were there. And we found that to be very, very strange, especially him. He's from Oregon, and he's hunted up here a lot. He's like, man, that's never happened. So we decided to try hunting again the next year. This time we decided to try hunting in Monroe. And we had went to Monroe, the two of us again, and I had dropped him off at one area. We were just scouting, before we actually were going hunting for the weekend. We were just scouting an area out. And I decided to go check out another area. I said, well, I'll pick him up in about an hour and a half. So I drove down to this area where there was a closed off gate, and I walked beyond the gate and walked up the clearing beyond the gate about 200 yards to another open clearing. And the same thing happened to me there that happened the year before, where it was just like completely dead silent, very weird. And I saw where the path continued on beyond this kind of bowl. I don't know what, just a big depression in the ground about 50 feet. And something just told me, don't go up there. And I had this really weird feeling. I didn't want to go up there. And the reason why I'm telling you these things is because I don't know what these things were. These are weird occurrences in the woods. That's kind of what I call them. And I can only relate them to Bigfoot, because that's the only place that I've ever heard anything like this. And so as I was leaving this area, after getting this really weird feeling, like I shouldn't be up there, as I'm walking back, something started following me. And every time I would stop, it would stop. I would move, it would move. And it was 100% clearly 2 feet, without a doubt. And the way it was moving through the trees was interesting to me after thinking back on it, because it was fluidly moving through the trees. But, when I looked over into the trees, now, if the trees, like if there was a lot of more open on the other side of the trees where I could see, maybe that's the only thing that can make this possible. But from what I could see, I mean, this stuff was so thick that I don't see how anything could move through it without just making a major crashing sound. But this thing was moving through it like fluid. And that's what was so weird about it. That's what kind of freaked me out. So I actually turned halfway down and looked at the area. It stopped, the footsteps stopped, and I turned and I looked and I said, okay, I'm going to face this. What is this? I, had my gun with me, and I just sit there and stared into the woods, and I heard, crack of a little limb and another little crack, and then I just freaked out and I just took off running. And so, I ran to my truck. I got in my truck and went pick Chad up, told him about the same thing. And he just made fun of me because, of what happened the year before. Well, I was able to make fun of him after this next one, because the very next year with Chad, the same guy, we decided to go elk hunting in the Olympic Peninsula. So we went up past Port Townsend, and we went way back up in the mountains there. We were really deep, and we had to hike in about 3/4 of a mile to get to where we were going to hunt. And we had set up camp a little bit a ways away from that, so we could go camp out. But we were able to get my truck up there. It was basically just an old logging road that kind of widened out at an area. And so we just made that our camping area. But as we had went up into the area where we were going to hunt and checked it out, we came back. It was getting dark real fast, and we had gotten up there kind of late. So we were like, okay, let's quickly make a fire. And as we were looking around to get firewood and stuff, and everything's wet and cold during this time of year, I started hearing movement in 3 different areas around us. Now, this was freaking me out big time. And Chad just started saying, dude, you're just freaking out, quick. He didn't want to hear me, and I kept telling him, Chad, listen, be quiet, listen. And he wouldn't shut up. He was just kind of mumbling and making fun of me. And then finally I got him to shut up and listen, because there was a nice little, you could hear something for sure. So he noticed, and he was like, yeah, there's 3 of them, whatever it is. And he chalked it off to being a deer. And I'm like, dude, that's not a deer. It's on 2 feet. Oh, in all 3 areas here. What is this? Is this hunters, sneaking up on us? So anyhow, he got me to, focus on the fire, because the sun was almost completely down. It was pretty dark. And we had tucked up the truck right next to the wood line. And on each side of the wood line, where we were, the wood line that I'm specifically talking about, you couldn't see a foot into it. It was just that big. And we had got the fire, and we had maybe a fire going about maybe 10 inches, 12 inches tall. It wasn't a big fire at all. It was just getting going. And we were both crouched down, like if you were, standing up and you just kind of crouched down, not putting your knees on the ground, but just squatted and, holding your hands out to get your hands warm by the fire. That's what we were doing. And my back was about 3 or 4 feet from the wood line. And we're sitting there warming our hands, not really saying anything. And then all of a sudden, and we, after thinking about this, we think it was probably within about 8 feet behind me where this happened. It sounded like a gunshot going off right behind me. And it was a stick breaking. It was a branch breaking. And this branch, when it broke, it sounded like a rifle round going off. And it made me, I'm in that squatted position. It made my head fall down, like, I don't know if you've seen that magician where he sneezes and it looks like his head is falling into his hands, and stuff. That's kind of how I felt, because I felt like I was going to get hit in the head by something. And Chad was in front of me looking at the wood line. And when I looked, I was kind of covering my head when this all happened. And I looked at him, and he was looking above me, and he said, F, and he just, took off running. And that freaked me out. And I said, F, and I jumped over the fire, took off running. And we ran to the truck, and, he was already in the truck loading his rifle, and he was completely freaked out. I think he actually saw something, because he would never talk about it. And he did not want me to turn the lights of my truck on when we got in the trunk. I kept saying, I'm going to turn the lights on. He says, don't turn the lights on. Do not turn the lights on. He was very adamant about this. And I didn't know what was going on. I was like, oh my gosh, and I was kind of yelling back at him, like, I told you something was there. I told you. And, what animal is going to sneak up on you, knowing that you're a human and knowing that there's 2 humans right there. what animal does that? An elk's not going to do that. A deer's not going to do that. Will a bear do that? I don't know. I'm not real sure, but whatever did this is the most interesting thing after thinking about this, that the branch or whatever it broke was not broke in a fashion of, like, if you can think about pulling on a branch. All of us have broken branches before, and when you pull them, they'll have a loud pop, but you'll hear all that fiber pop too. You'll hear all the fiber pull, like, and pop. This was just like a single pow, and that was it. I mean, there was no preface to the sound coming at all. It was just instantly pow. And that scared me to death. I have never had anything like that happen before in my life. And the only thing I can contribute to, because it was definitely up probably around what we figured, what Chad told me, it was probably about 7 or 8 feet in the air where the sound came from, where he was looking. But, again, I think he actually saw something in the wood line and just never wanted to talk about it. Because since then, he actually lives down in Texas now. And he works for another company that travels around all over the United States setting up CNC machines. So I haven't gotten him to come clean on what he's actually saw. I'm hoping one day I can get him to do that. So
yeah, it is terrifying when you hear that pop. I've heard it before, and it does sound like a gun going off. I mean, it really does. And that's close. You hear about them sneaking in on camps like that all the time. Obviously, you didn't see what it was, but I mean, what else could it be? It wasn't a person. I don't know about a black bear. I mean, I think if they're that close, they're going to come in. If a predator's that close, it's going to come in. Just like your other encounter where they circle the camp. I mean, I've heard that type of encounter, I can't even tell you how many times. And they do this weird thing where they'll circle your camp and kind of close in on you and kind of get closer and closer, but they'll stay just outside of the firelight. It's creepy, man. It's real creepy. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that, I've never had anything like that happen before. I mean, that was something that, when you try to explain it, you try to debunk it, you try to, figure out, what the most practical thing it could have been. It doesn't make any sense. And the weirdest thing about it is getting there, how did it get so close without us hearing it? I don't really believe in coincidences. I'm not one to really believe in them. And for a branch to be broke like that close to us, doesn't make any sense to me. There's nothing that comprehends that was a purposely broke branch by something. It wasn't like, oh, there's a big fat owl sitting up there and the branch broke or something, like that, a big bear up there. We didn't hear anything hit the ground. I mean, what we heard was a pow, and then it was completely dead quiet. You didn't even hear it might have happened, but I don't remember hearing the branch even hitting the ground or anything. We just heard the pow, and that was it. We took off running with our tails between our legs. We didn't want nothing to do with it, because whatever that was way more powerful than we were. I mean, it sounded as if, I don't know if you've ever took a 2x4 and jumped up and broke it. It could be a real loud pop, a good fresh 2x4. And, you like place it between two cinder blocks and jump up and break it. If it's a good one, it'll pop real good. But if, it just doesn't splinter. I mean, this was like a loud pop. So it was very unusual, very, very unusual. And then, we hiked in that morning around 3:30 into our hunting area, and it was completely dead again. Nothing going on at all. We didn't see a single animal, and there was tracks everywhere the day before. So, we don't know what was going on. So actually, Chad was making fun of me, saying that, or kind of ragging me, saying every time I go out, something weird happens, and that's never happened in all my years of hunting.
Yeah, it's your fault. It's your fault all of a sudden.
Exactly. Yeah. But, there was another encounter, something else that happened just most recently, and this is up high around Easton, Washington, high in the mountains. Me and a group of friends, a newly acquired group of friends, had went camping around around Labor Day weekend it was. Okay. So, there were some people out there, they were running their side-by-sides and, their motorcycles and stuff, but no one was, we were the only ones camping in this area. And it was in a pretty dried up creek bed at the time. There was a small amount of water going through there, but it was pretty dried up at the time. They told me that, after the snow melts from the next season, it'll be, rushing. But right now, because of the time of season, it was just low. And we were there for a few nights, and we had one morning, woke up to about 5:30 in the morning. I was in a hammock sleeping. I felt so vulnerable. And there was in fact, the first night I freaked out so much I slept in the truck. I was too scared to sleep in the hammock. And there was a guy in a tent, and then the couple was in the truck. And I was woke up, and Tony, who was in the tent, was woke up by in the creek just right. And we were camped right next to the creek. And there was rock clacking going on about 5:30 in the morning. And that got our attention big time. And then we found a bunch of prints, some rock stacks. Could that have been human? Absolutely. But the prints were not human at all. Absolutely not. The dimensions were way, way out of proportion. And I'll send you some of those pictures too. And also, the second time we went up to this spot, and I wasn't part of this. I had just climbed into the tent to go to bed, and the other three that were there started singing "Living on a Prayer" really loud. That's what alcohol does to you a little bit. And right after they finished, within probably, I don't know the exact time, maybe 10, 15 minutes or something like that, maybe 5 minutes. I can't really remember. They got whooped at from across the creek. They heard a bunch of whoops that were coming from the tree line up there. And, where we were at, there's no one out there. We knew there was no one out there. And it's just a lot of strange stuff. There's been rock throwing out there, and previous camping ventures out there by us, had rocks thrown and stuff. So it's a pretty interesting area. And actually we found the area from one of your previous shows. We knew where this area was, and we went out there. We're not looking for them again. We're just camping, having fun, but we like to go and kind of scare ourselves a little bit. And so, yeah. And, we're just older, big kids, I guess you could say. And we just like to go out there and have fun.
Yeah, be careful in those areas, though. Be real careful, because these things are so unpredictable. And the areas that you're going to, there is a lot of activity. What do you think that they are? I'm kind of curious, James, on your opinion. What do you think that these things actually are?
I've thought about this a lot, and I'm gonna throw some stuff out here and then try to weave it together. I love what M.K. Davis has said. I like what Indian tradition says. And what I mean by what M.K. Davis said he believes that, what is it, the Blue Ridge Mountain Bigfoot, I forget the guy's name, the one of the most famous footages of it walking, he's going, oh, Jesus,
right.
When he sees it. Yeah, can't remember his name. Anyhow, M.K. Davis thinks that's a real giant. And that's what he called it. That's a real giant. And then like Patty is a hybrid. I'm definitely on board with the Sasquatch Genome Project. I believe that's a absolutely 100% legitimate, study done with good science and good lab work. I don't see anything faulty in the lab work. The only thing I see is people poo-pooing all over the results. And they said that, and most of the people say the results were contaminated. Well, the Dr. Ketchum, who was the head of the study, she showed that these samples were cleaned, and you can actually clean the samples. And if you have a dirty sample, it will show up after you get your results back. And so everything that, that the Genome Project did, I think is absolutely, legit, which means that the mitochondrial DNA was human female, I think it might even been native. I'm not sure about that, but then the nuclear DNA was unknown. They'd never seen anything like it, and so to me that makes a lot of sense. And now, where could you go from there? I mean, that's where you could get real crazy and start going off into the Nephilim and the Raphaim and all that stuff. And I don't know where to go from there. I just know that I do not believe they are an ape. Let's just put it that way. I typically apes, especially when you look at feet, apes don't have human-looking feet. I don't know of any ape that has a human-looking foot. Most apes have, a distended big toe, like a hand. And, these footprints are very human-like. And so, and then when you add in the Sierra sounds and all that, it's just, we've got something unique. It's, can I call them a people? I don't know. But I don't believe they're just an ape. I believe there's something more than an ape. And that's really the best thing I could say. I'm not going to shut my mind to, something, what's the simplest thing in this case. This is where I think you got to keep a pretty open mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that they're an ape either. And I've thought about that too. I remember one time I was sitting in front of my desk and I had all these casts sitting there. And I thought the same thing you did. I was really looking at them and I was like, man, these are on a large scale human footprints. But they do, I understand why people say ape though, because a lot of their behavior sometimes does act like an ape, like a non-human primate. A lot of what the way they vocalize, throwing things at you, a lot of their behavior is, but you're right. A lot of their behavior is not ape-like, like the Sierra sounds or like Claire's encounter. You hear her in the intro of the show and she's saying they were chattering back and forth. And when I asked her, did it sound like the Sierra sound? She's like, absolutely. That's exactly what I heard. So it does make you, I think you're right. I think it is something very unique. My next question is, where do they come from? If once we figure out what they are, where does it come from? And there's more questions than answers. The more you get into this, the more questions you have than answers. And anyone that has all the answers for you is probably lying to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would not disagree with that one bit, because you can't pin. What's interesting is you can't pin any one thing down with these things. Nothing, not a single thing. Yeah. There's not a single thing about them you can pin down. Every time you think you've pinned down one little part of them, whether it's looks, footprint, voice, whatever, whatever it is, then it gets thrown all out of whack, by something else that you hear about. And so it's a fascinating subject. I mean, I'm totally fascinated with it. And I'd just like to throw something out here that, and I might get his name wrong, and I hope I'm not getting his name wrong, but Steve Isdall, is that his name, from How to Hunt?
How to Hunt, yeah.
Yeah, I am super supportive of him and what he's doing, because he's trying to bring some credibility back to the Bigfoot groups, people who are interested in this. I think that's a fantastic thing he's doing, and I'm in full support of it. Just to make that known, and he didn't ask me to do this. I don't even know him, but I like where he's going with it, because that's I think the biggest problem with the whole subject itself, with people that call themselves researchers. If those people that call themselves researchers had just an easy, open mind and could, take in what witnesses are actually saying and go from there, there'd be a whole lot more respect in the whole field, I think. But you have too many people that have agendas, biased agendas at that, and it causes problems, and then they start crapping all over each other. And I've never even been to a single Bigfoot conference, but, I hear about all this stuff and I'm like, man, doesn't sound good. And it does not sound good for the interest of the subject. But, here's the thing, when it comes down to it, we know these things are real. We have all the evidence, period. The evidence is there. The DNA's evidence is there. The scat evidence is there. The hair evidence is there. The footprints evidence is there. We know they're there. It's a fact. What are they? That's the big question.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And you're right. Steve, on his YouTube, is How to Hunt. if anyone wants to check it out. Steve's actually a really nice guy. I've talked to him in the past, and he does have legitimate encounters. I mean, this guy's seen some stuff, and I know he gets a lot of crap, but Steve's actually a really nice guy. But have you ever thought about going back out to these areas? Have you been back out since you had these type of encounters?
Yeah, actually, like I said, we don't go out to look for these things, but we like to put ourselves out there. And I can't remember the researcher that you've had on one time. He was one of the few that you like, and nice guy. But I agree with him. If you want to go look for these things, you don't go looking for them. You just put yourself out there and act like a human, and then pay attention to your surroundings, and that's what you got to do. That's what happens. But, we don't go to regular, camping areas. We go out in the sticks when we go camping. And that might be another reason why we, get the situations that we get, is because we're not really out there where regularly there people are out there. So it's an interest to whatever animal may be coming in to look at us. It's like, hey, what are these guys doing? Come to check us out.
Yeah.
So, I'd be foolish to say that it's not risky, but I do believe it is risky. We usually are going out there pretty, safe. We're well armed. So we don't go out there looking for trouble, but we go out there and want to pay attention. And I think the guy that that did the tent study, where he put the recorder in the tent.
Oh yeah, Randy Harrington. Yeah. I love what he's done. I've paid attention to a lot of his work, and I love what he's done. And we're going to try to maybe duplicate that a little bit. I'm looking at buying some really good audio recording equipment that can be left out, for 24 to 48 hours at a time. And I'm wanting to do that. Just, it's just for my own self enjoyment. I mean, I don't, anybody ask me about Bigfoot, I'll tell them. And if you think I'm crazy, oh, well, that's your opinion. That's okay. I don't mind. Yeah. I'm not out to keep up with the Joneses or anything like that. I'm just a easygoing Southern boy that, had some weird things happen to him and now has a little bit of interest in finding out what it is. That's pretty much what it is. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me know if you get anything, and be safe while you're out there. And I appreciate you coming on, James. Thank you so much for taking the time. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.